The pressure to release these files is going to grow, and there's every reason to think that the lawyers handling the Epstein estate have a lot of records that might be very damaging to Donald. So this issue is not going to go away.
Now, Donald Trump has signed a bill which has ended the longest government shutdown in US history. But a day the president was trying to claim triumph for his party saw him dragged further into the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. Congress released thousands of pages of documents from the estate of the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, including some that mentioned Trump. We got 3 emails initially yesterday and then many more. Now, lawmakers, including Republican ones, could force the release of even more documents. David Cay Johnston is a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist. He is also the author of It's Even Worse Than You Think, What the Trump Administration is Doing to America. Well, David is with us now. David, good afternoon.
Hello. Good to be with you, Rosalie.
We'll come on to the emails in just a moment. But first of all, can we just start with this government shutdown? It's such an alien concept to us here in the UK because we don't sort of have a system or a strategy where something like that could happen. 43 days the government was effectively not operating. What finally led to the end of it?
Well, once the Trump administration decided they were going to punish those people who travel by airplane a lot, which means people who have money or expense accounts, the politics began to shift because this was no longer about Trump's wanting to deny health care to 17 million Americans by taking away a tax credit that made it possible for them to afford health insurance, and then to take food away. And he literally went to court to fight to not provide food to poor pregnant women, toddlers, infants, and poor adults, almost 50 million of the 340 million Americans. The politics shifted. It didn't shift because of the poor. It shifted because of how it affected people who travel all the time in airplanes. But this hasn't gone away. The deal only lasts until the end of January. Then there'll be another funding crisis. And the Democrats have made it clear they will not go along with stripping health care away from the poorest people in America.
And just to explain the airports, is because air traffic controllers weren't being paid, were they, while the government shutdown was happening? So lots of them were calling in sick and saying they weren't turning up at work, and therefore we then had the flight disruption. So
and Rosalie, to be clear, the Trump administration could have used military air controllers to fill in for the unpaid controllers who didn't show up. This was a choice to make air traffic slow down and disrupt and cause people in some cases to have 2, 3, 4 flights in a row canceled. They chose to do this because they understood the political leverage it provided.
So what happens? We had this sort of very intense period of negotiation and almost sort of this grand game of chicken, really, on which side would move first or who would be persuaded to the other side. The deal that's been put in place, which means we now have a resumption of the government services, it's only temporary until January. Has actually anything shifted, or might we end up in the same situation then?
Well, the pain being felt by some Republican lawmakers, especially after the elections 8 days ago, in which the Democrats romped across the country, they romped, have certainly going to cause some Republicans in vulnerable districts to rethink, do you really want to have a war on the poor? And that will be a big theme of the Democrats, that the Republican Party and Donald Trump are engaged in a war against poor people, particularly on health care. And remember, unlike every other modern country, including yours, we don't have universal health care. Health care is not a right in the United States because in America, civil rights grow out of property rights, whereas in Europe and the UK, they grow out of the concept of human dignity, and you get very different legal issues as a result.
I'm sure the Republicans would not describe it as a war against poor people, but I understand the position from which you are coming from, and obviously they are not here. Let's move on to the developments yesterday. That's our sort of, let's not get too into the weeds of it, but it is in some part linked to the fact that the government shutdown was ended. Yesterday, we got sort of 2 dispatches of documents. We got these 3 emails, and then we got 20,000 more documents. In essence, what have we learnt there about Donald Trump's implication into Jeffrey Epstein's activities?
Well, we know from these beyond refutation that Donald Trump was deeply involved with Jeffrey Epstein, despite all the efforts to say I hardly knew who he was. We know that a
Can you
New York
define
Times.
deeply involved? Sort of give us some
Oh,
examples of what the email showed.
yeah. Uh, Epstein has referred to Trump as his best friend for 10 years. The documents, and I have not been through all of them, you can't in this period of time, but the documents show that there was a continuing frequent engagement in New York City and Mar-a-Lago between Trump and Epstein. I'm sorry, in Palm Beach, where Mar-a-Lago is. Epstein owned a mansion not far from Trump's Mar-a-Lago mansion. And so there's really no question that the two of them were deeply involved. I think the most interesting thing that came out yesterday was that Epstein in 2016 sent an email to a New York Times reporter based in London offering to give him pictures of underage girls in bikinis with Donald Trump. Now, any good reporter would have said, oh, well, let's go see those, and then said, well, those aren't really news. There's nothing wrong with being in a picture with a teenage girl. You think there's something more here I should see? And asked for compromising photos. And that's, of course, the issue is there irrefutable proof of Donald Trump in inappropriate situations with underage girls?
Yeah, and I haven't seen the details of that specific email that you mentioned. One that has caused a bit of a stir. And what is very difficult, we must say, with all of these emails is we do not have the context around them as to why they were sent. So there is no sort of smoking gun that I think the Democrats are hoping to have unearthed or found. But I think what it does do is raises questions over whether Donald Trump has been fully transparent about what he knew about Jeffrey Epstein. That, as much, I think, is true.
Yeah, Rosalie, I don't think there's any question at all that Donald has been less than transparent. When he ran in the 2024 election, he kept saying, we're going to make all the Epstein files secret. And then as soon as he got in office and they had FBI agents go through the records that the Justice Department had, suddenly, well, we don't need to release these. There's nothing here. There's nothing to see. Why would you do that unless there's something compromising, is the reasonable response to that. These files, one way or another, are going to come out. There are at the moment, by one vote, enough members of the House for what's called a discharge petition to get those files released. And the Trump administration, of course, has complete legal authority right now. And people should know I teach law, has complete legal authority to release all the files. It's chosen not to do so. Now, there's going to be tremendous pressure brought to bear on the four Republicans, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Nancy Mace, and the Congressman from Kentucky, Massey, to change their vote so that this measure will fail. So next week, we'll see if the measure actually passes.
So
but one way or another,
I'm so sorry to interrupt. Can we go back a step just to explain the logistics of what's happened? We've had this one set of tranche of documents. There could be another, but that hinges on a vote. So therefore, you're saying the pressure will be on those Republicans to try and stop that happening.
That's right. There are four Republicans who said we'll vote to make all of these files public, and tremendous pressure is going to be brought on them to back off. In fact, Lauren Boebert, the Colorado Congresswoman, was taken to the Situation Room in the basement of the White House in an effort to pressure her. And after she left, she mocked Trump. So it doesn't seem that she's going to give in. But the pressure to release these files is going to grow. And there's every reason to think that the lawyers handling the Epstein estate have a lot of records that might be very damaging to Donald. So this issue is not going to go away. I can tell you what you should expect if and when compromising photos or video appear of Donald Trump.
I mean, that is an if and a when, but go ahead.
Absolutely an if. Caroline Leavitt will say, fake photos, AI, not to be believed. These are hoaxes, because that's what she's been saying all the way along. And what other defense could you offer? And by the way, we have forensic tools to establish if a photo or a video has been altered. So that defense won't work with people who understand the technology.
How do you imagine the White House is going to try and get out ahead of this? Because they have been trying to do that sort of unsuccessfully for the last year, which is why we have had this sort of drip, drip, drip of the information.
Well, the nicest thing would be a time machine so Donald could go back in the campaign and not say, we're going to release all the Epstein files as soon as I'm president. That would be the nicest thing to do. I don't know how they're going to get ahead of this. I don't see a path for them. But what they'll try to do instead is discredit the information. Don't trust your lying eyes. Don't believe what's there. This is all a hoax. They keep calling this whole thing a hoax. The big question will be if there's irrefutable proof of serious conduct, which would be criminal but no longer prosecutable in the United States by Donald Trump. Will that arouse moral indignation in America or not? I think it will, and I don't think he can survive that as someone who's known Trump for 40 years and written about him in 3.5 books. But there are a lot of people who think the opposite. They think the American public is so embracing that, Donald is who he is, that they'll go, yeah, all right, so he did these horrible things with underage girls. I don't care. He's not doing them today. That will be a great test of America.
Do you know what?
Alleged to have done, absolutely.
David, why the Democrats had the opportunity before Donald Trump was president again to shine much greater light on this, and they didn't take that opportunity. Why not?
Well, Joe Biden, when he became president, appointed an attorney general, a very highly respected judge, and said, I'm not going to touch the Justice Department. Presidents should not. The Justice Department is here to represent the people, not my office. And Merrick Garland, the attorney general, is a Boy Scout. He waited a long time to begin to really investigate Trump over the insurrection on January 6th, over the documents, hundreds of thousands of pages of documents that were taken to Mar-a-Lago. And this effort to we're above partisan politics didn't work. There were a few Democrats in the House and the Senate who wanted to be aggressive. The party did not about this. It's unfortunate that we didn't have a proper and full investigation, and it's to the shame of the Democrats who have just, we're above the fray. We're better than the Trump Republicans, and that didn't work out for them at all.
David, thank you for your time and for the context. David Cay Johnston, who is the author of It's Even Worse Than You Think, What the Trump Administration is Doing to America. I mean, the wider context of this is Donald Trump's approval ratings are actually really starting to decline, and he cannot get away from this crisis that gets bigger and bigger, and therefore the questions loom. And people are coming to us making their own assumptions.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, though, that the approval ratings drop is being put down to his inability to have come good on his economic promises.
Not this scandal.
Not this. It doesn't seem as yet to have really dented his popularity in a way that maybe we would think that it should.